Welcome to this episode of Founded in Tech. I am your host, Mark Eckerle, and today I sit down with Jess Campanola, who is the CFO of Nomad Health. Nomad is bringing the health tech industry to the forefront by prioritizing medical staffing for nurses and physicians, which is relevant now more so than ever. On today's episode, we discuss Nomad's business operations and how they handled the COVID-19 pandemic. Jess gives us his thoughts on being the first finance professional hired and how he believes attitude and culture are critical, starting at the top within a company. And finally, he provided some tips that he has learned throughout his career that he thinks are important for all professionals, not just upper management, to know and understand in order to be successful. I had a great time catching up with Jess today and learning more about Nomad Health. They're really working on some exciting stuff, so I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hello, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Jess from Nomad Health to the show. Jess is the CFO and joins us today to talk about his background as well as Nomad Health and some of the exciting things that they're working on. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Of course. Yeah, likewise. So why don't we kick things off by you giving us a quick background, introduction of yourself, your career, and kind of how you ended up as the CFO.
Okay. I'll try to put 2 decades in a few minutes to keep everyone's engagement here. So I started my career at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I got to this place a little bit not in the traditional way. So I started in PricewaterhouseCoopers as a restructuring advisor where, what I like to say is you're advising companies that are on the emergency room of corporate health. They're either about to be in bankruptcy or going to emerge out of bankruptcy. And there, I spent a lot of time building financial models and building up some accounting chops and got to learn a lot about credit and bankruptcy, and that led me into a distressed debt fund. And I spent about 8 years there investing in a lot of companies, investing in small tranches of corporate debt. Also, we purchased the company and then sold it, so I got to see some operational aspects of actually running a company. And during those 8 years, I really became inspired with looking at different investments, and you'd see founders who started a company with like $5 million of EBITDA and grow it to $100 million of EBITDA, and they get taken private or get bought. And I was like, how do companies do that? How do companies grow that way? And I knew that a lot of that was in the operational aspect of it. So I wanted to leverage my finance background, which was built on advising and investing into this, what I found very inspirational as an operator. So that pushed me down the path of what I think is the best place in the world, which is New York City's technology scene. And I landed at a company called Gust, where we did cap table management, 498 valuations, and it was like a deal room for angel investors. So entrepreneurs often needed to provide information, as a lot of entrepreneurs know, to potential investors, and Gust captured that. I spent some time there. It was my first operating experience. I loved it, learned everything from HR to fundraising and all the nitty gritty that lies in underneath the hood in startups. And then I got a chance to meet Alexi, who's the CEO of Nomad Health, and Justin and the rest of the team. And after 6 years at Gust and meeting that team, I felt like what Nomad Health was doing was extremely special. The team was stacked, and I felt like it was a good time for me to join Nomad Health. And so I did, and I haven't looked back. It's been really exciting. We've grown substantially since I've been there. Happy to talk more about that now too.
How long have you been with Nomad Health?
3 years now. Over 3 years now.
I'm sure the time's flying by, right?
Sure is.
It's neat to see how you wanted to jump down the operation side of things. And even though you're the CFO, you're on the accounting side. In these technology companies, in the startup world, you're working under the umbrella, kind of wearing multiple hats, right? You're doing a jack of all trades. So you're not just kind of strictly focused on the accounting side of things.
I was the first finance hire at Gus, and again, the first finance hire at Nomad Health. So being the first finance hire, you take a lot of the outsourced bookkeeping and you bring it in-house, and you really start to press upon what really drives the company. And to do that, you need to build relationships with all the stakeholders in the company. I need to understand, what our engineering team is doing. I need to understand what the product team is doing. And you go so far down the path with all these teams, and you build strong relationships with them. And what I like to do in my role is, normally finance is a person, no, don't spend any money, or no. And what I like to do is I try to figure out how to empower them to really be the best at their jobs, and how can you empower them to make the right investments. So it's my job to try to elicit the information that allows us to make really smart investments and empower them to, like, hey, go be the best you can be, go run after it. And that requires you to get into a lot of parts of the company that otherwise I wouldn't necessarily see if I was, stuck in simply a finance role. So I'm often talking with the ops team, the sales team, the engineering team, the product team, our people team. I mean, across the board, I know a lot of what's going on in the company, and I truly enjoy it. That's one of the best parts about the job, is building the relationships with many different stakeholders.
Yeah, it's a great strategy role, and I mean, there's a lot of juggling going on. Just part of cash management, kind of just seeing how things are coming along. So jumping right to the company now, give me a background of Nomad Health. Kind of what's the overall operations look like, the structure, and the one thing I wanted to kind of clarify is, are these services only offered in the United States? Is this international? What's that kind of look like as well?
Yes, we are only in the United States, and there is a huge opportunity in the United States. So we're pretty happy going after that opportunity right now. As far as what Nomad Health does, if we just zoom out for a minute, Nomad Health is, we created the first online marketplace for travel nurses to search for and apply for travel nursing jobs across the country, or all clinicians, in fact. That is different than what exists in the industry today. We've brought transparency. We've brought a delightful experience to clinicians trying to find temporary employment across the country. What's happened over the past few years is, especially with COVID, is the demand for what we offer has just accelerated. So clinicians want transparency, and they want to be able to search. They want to be empowered to find the jobs that they want, when they want, at a certain pay that they want. And by offering them a delightful experience, very good pay, Nomad has really become a leader in temporary healthcare staffing. And the opportunity is large. I mean, it's a $20 billion plus opportunity out there. I feel like we're just getting started. So when I joined, the organization, we probably had about 20 corporate employees, and we had a collection of traveling clinicians. And in terms of the structure, we have just grown and focused on the areas where we feel like we're the strongest and actually want to be best in the world at. And so far, it's worked out well. And like I said, the adoption we've seen because of COVID, there was a ton of demand for travel staffing across the country. And Nomad actually answered the call because we were able to intake a ton of jobs. We had a source of clinicians that really wanted to run towards the crisis. And as a result, we saw new users register. We saw a spike in applications, and we saw a spike in actually placing nurses and doctors by the bedsides. We felt like we were at the right place at the right time, and our technology is providing a great experience for those clinicians. And I think, as we look forward, we've been able to retain a lot of the clinicians that are traveling for us. They do like the experience, and the product speaks for itself, as does the full experience.
So just to confirm, your Nomad is not a staffing agency. It's all these traveling nurses, these traveling physicians, they're employees of the company, right? They're totally under your umbrella?
Yeah, they're employees of Nomad.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I don't want to say it was a good thing, but the 2020 was a positive year for the company, right? Just based on everything that happened, being the industry that you're in, you guys saw a lot of opportunity last year. There's a lot of growth. So I'm curious, kind of overall, what did 2020 look like? Another path I wanted to take this down was there was so much focus on the immediate need for the impact of what was happening with COVID. What kind of happened with like elective surgeries or things like that? How did that impact the company? Was there anything that was kind of put on pause or time out as we got to focus on what's happening with strictly COVID, and let's prioritize that as opposed to kind of some other elective or other avenues that maybe the company is trying to pursue?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in 2020, what we saw, obviously, we are in the market of making sure our clients have the right qualified individuals when they need them the most, and that the qualified individuals are at the right place. So what we saw in 2020 was the need, like you said, for elective surgeries. A lot of them were canceled because the hospitals had to deal with the influx of COVID-related patients. So a lot of our travel nurses, they were canceled, but that was offset by the need for nurses to come into the hospitals, a huge spike in need for nurses to come into the hospitals to deal with the influx from COVID patients. So what was, a cancellation from elective surgeries, and it seems like now it is coming back, it was offset by a demand in another part of the healthcare industry. So it was a little bit of a whipsaw, and we felt that for sure. And I think the entire country felt it. But the good thing is that Nomad was able to respond very quickly, right? We were able to put those jobs out there the same day we got them. And we were able to put nurses, we were able to get applications in as quickly as we got the jobs to where the hospitals needed them most. And we were able to do that with speed and accuracy, and we were able to land highly qualified clinicians to where they wanted to go. Again, it goes back to, if you think of the play of what our clinicians are doing, they really ran towards this situation, and it was impressive. And I'm sitting behind a computer, and I'm really honored to try to put these nurses and these doctors in the places where they needed the most. So I was happy to be a part of the solution, but not to the same degree that our clinicians were a part of the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're the real heroes, I guess, right? They're the ones wearing with their feet on the ground, wearing actually going to battle. So I guess the growth standpoint. So you said there was rapid growth in 2020 just to fill all these needs. How quickly was that happening? Like, could you guys not fill some of these needs quick enough? Like, what did that look like? How, because I'm sure there was just so many roles that needed to be filled. So were you guys like the hiring process? What did that look like? Were you guys just constantly like 24/7 operations for basically Q1, Q2 last year of 2020? Like, because that was when I think COVID hit the hardest.
Yeah. So there was, as you indicated, there was a huge demand for clinicians. There's always been a supply and demand imbalance for with respect to clinicians, but we felt it more so now than we ever had. We saw a huge demand, and we were trying to introduce these jobs to our nurses as quickly as we can and get those nurses to apply to those jobs as quickly as we can. And for sure, some of the jobs we couldn't fill. I don't think any agency out there was able to fill all the jobs they received. We were able to do so at a very high quality, and we did fill a lot of jobs. But I think there's also in the grant, if you look at this industry, there's a lot of jobs that go unfilled even when there's not a pandemic. I think what we were able to do is step into a place and actually improve the fill rate in certain cases because we had a huge supply of nurses already as Nomad employees, but also we were able to acquire a lot of nurses that wanted to be empowered to search for these jobs themselves, as opposed to go down the traditional route of speaking to an individual or getting calls from an individual that was saying, hey, I have these jobs. If you're empowered to search for these jobs and you know that there's 1,000 jobs, we were able to open up and widen that part of the funnel that allowed nurses and empowered them to search for those jobs and actually intake these applications. And this is where we think technology is making a big breakthrough in healthcare staffing. Not only does it offer a delightful experience, a lot of transparency, and enable us to pay our nurses very well, but it also allows it also tries to right size the supply and demand imbalance because of the way we can intake a lot of data. And that's, we're in the process of building this scalable company that allows us to, what we think is going to change the way healthcare staffing is done.
For sure. Yeah. So I guess really quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on it. Take me into what that process would look like on the nurses side of things, on your employee side of things. So they get staffed, they're traveling, they're going directly to someone's house. Are they going to a hospital? Is that for a week? Is that for a day, extended period of time? Kind of what does that look like from the employee side of things?
Sure. So if you focus on just, say, a nurse assignment, on average, these nurse assignments are 13 weeks. So if you think about the nurse's experience, they will search for jobs on their mobile phone or on their desktop, and they find a job that they like, that they're qualified for, and they will apply. And then we will end up making sure they get submitted into the actual job. So we have to, we do our own work and qualify them and just collect a lot of information. The nurse then starts an assignment probably, anywhere from 2 weeks to a month later. And those nurses will then work for, on average, say 13 weeks. That's the standard assignment length. And then at the end of that assignment, the nurse will find another assignment. And, they often find another assignment with Nomad because they just enjoy the experience. And that's on average what it looks like. Now, there are certain cases where some assignments are shorter, some assignments are longer, and it varies. But overall, that's the nature of the assignment. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I wasn't curious what the timing would look like. Is someone just kind of, is it like every 2 days looking for something new? So 13 weeks, it definitely makes it more.
Yeah, there's part of the industry that does, like for example, per diem. They may have shifts that they need to get filled, just daily shifts. So there are parts of the industry where a lot of other companies are focused on. We're focused right now on the 13-week assignment in the travel nursing industry. But I think like I said, there's a lot of opportunity overall. And the other thing I'll just mention that you brought up is, do the nurses actually go to someone's home? The nurses actually all of our clients are mostly just large hospital networks. So the nurses want the hospitals that aren't going to the house.
And you're sending nurses around the country, right? It's not like
around the country
within your area. They can go. They want to sign up to go to another state. They can basically try and assign themselves to do that.
Yep.
Very neat. Very neat. Awesome. Yep. So taking a step back, right? I'd be curious to get your thoughts on the health tech industry as a whole. So you guys are obviously a big player, and especially in the last 12 to 18 months, it's been, I mean, the opportunity there has just been massive for Nomad Health. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on where this industry can go. There's been a lot of great advances and technological breakthroughs. So just where do you think the industry is going? Where do you think some of the needs are? Not necessarily what your company is working on or maybe what they are working on, but just kind of picking your brain a little bit. What do you see for the future?
So, I mean, healthcare is such a loaded term when it comes to healthcare technology, right? There's so many different avenues there. I will speak to it from my vantage point because I know there are people that are better at talking to other parts of the healthcare industry, especially as it relates to technology. What I see a lot, and I noticed this as soon as I joined, is that there exists a lot of efficiency or inefficiency and overlapping of systems where automation can prove to not only maintain a degree of accuracy, but also shift kind of the value structure of where value can actually be created and had. So, for example, I deal a lot with hospital billing and timesheets and payroll systems, and I think there is a really big opportunity to remove a lot of the inefficiencies that exist there, as well as some of the inaccuracies. And I know probably the hospitals and other channel partners we have probably feel that same pain point. And I have a feeling that healthcare, the behaviors are always hard to change. And healthcare has operated in a certain way for a long period of time, but now there is a lot of investment, and there are a lot of smart people trying to improve this because they realize that there is a fundamental problem in the industry where there's a lot of money being spent, and there's a lot of room for technology to come in and improve the way that money is being spent, so there can be value had by all stakeholders, patients, clinicians. They can share in this. It doesn't need to be as expensive as some of this stuff is. So I think that there is a lot of inefficiencies that exist in the system. I see it a lot from the back office, and I feel like we can improve that with technology because a lot of that can be automated. And I also think when you start to think about healthcare staffing, there are a lot of products out there that try to improve the efficiency within healthcare staffing, and I think Nomad is going to, if not a leader now, it's going to become one in terms of making sure hospitals are staffed at the right level so that they can actually become a very efficient organization and do what they want to do best, which is serve their patients. And I feel like Nomad is going to be, if not already, we're going to be pushing towards that.
Yeah. No, I mean, we and not just in healthcare technology, but in just in our everyday lives, we have an abundance of data. So, right, being able to have those systems to read the data, manipulate it, kind of tweak it to what we want it to say, and having those right systems to automate it. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is building that automation. And I don't think it's just in your industry. I think it's across the board.
Across the board.
A lot of companies just need to catch up, right, with where we are on our technological advances, and really building that up. So I think that would be definitely a big thing. And I could personally say that I am not a fan of timesheets, as I have to do one myself. So
yeah,
if there's a way to automate that, I am 100% on board.
Yeah. I think, we're basically in the business of making sure our clinicians can get the jobs they want. And we want to make that experience just an absolute delight for them because they're working extremely hard day in and day out, and we want to serve them. So anything we can do to make that experience better is what we're pushing towards. And I think technology is one of the answers to getting us closer there.
Okay. No, I totally agree. So I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit now, and I think this would be a good point for some of our listeners as maybe they're facing some of these. So what hurdles would you say you have faced during your time, whether at Nomad or one of your previous jobs, kind of something that you've learned during your experience that you have overcome from a company standpoint, some obstacles that you faced where you kind of had to pivot or change course, or you realized it was a good learning curve?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think oftentimes in early stage companies, when you have a vision, going from A to Z requires you going from B, C, D, and so on to get to Z.
People
And
always see Z and they're like, oh wow,
yeah,
that's
and you know what? We need people to see Z. We need people to have that vision and look so far down the path. But the way to get there could be curvy, and it's not as direct. And I think what I've seen oftentimes is, and the way I like to address it, and it takes, and it takes certain people to be able to do this, is let's look at the hard truths. Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the data. Let's say this is what we know, and rather than talk about, let's speculate about the future. Let's look at what we know right now, and let's continue to learn more about how to actually get there. What's the quickest path to get to Z? But in order to do that, it's based on what actually occurred, and then iterating on that and hypothesizing about what's going to occur the next month and the next month. And what did we get right? What did we get wrong? What did we learn about? And you close that gap between knowledge and speculation, and I feel like that gets you on the right path. So the hard thing, and this is not new information, it's look at the hard truths of the business and acknowledge them and don't ignore them. And I think at Nomad we've done a tremendous job at that, to be honest, where we often look at, I know it's data-driven companies, I hear it all the time too, and there is a lot of data out there, but there's not a lot of action as a result of that data. And maybe there is, but I know at Nomad we try to take action with our data. We look at this data and we learn from it day in and day out. And I feel like that is something that we've adopted, and it's really helped our business, because ultimately that is the pulse of behavior that we're seeing in our industry, and it allows us to make the right moves to help our clinicians and our clients. That's how you get to fulfill, I think, the vision. So it sounds easy, but it's really not, because sometimes you have such a strong perspective on where you think things should be that you often have a bias that is focused around the center of the universe that exists inside your head, but not outside on how the real world works. So I feel like you have to look at the hard truths and you have to respond to them. And that is something that I think is one of the differences. There's many differences between, successful companies and not successful companies, but I think that's one of the differences between successful businesses and not. Like I said, there are many, but that's one area that I like to focus on, because it requires a degree of discipline, and you have to unhinge yourself from your own internal biases and say, okay, how's the world working? I expect it to work this way, but if it's not working this way, I need to change, and I need to know how it's working, and that's where the data comes from.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people have their vision, right? They set out on their course, they go through, like you said, from A to Z, so they're going along their journey and they have their vision. There's definitely some bias built in there, but kind of taking that step back throughout that journey and just saying, okay, am I where I want to be? Am I where I expect it to be? Do I need to change course? Do I need to pivot? Do I need to do something in order to get to my goal? You're, like you said, facing those hard truths. It's not always easy. It's not always to look, not just introspective, but also just look when you're thinking of a company, looking at the numbers, looking at the data as a whole, and really taking it in and processing and seeing what you need to do as next steps, rather than just going through the ebbs and flows. Because you could go down that journey and realize that you should have looked back sooner while you had the time, and maybe you went too far down a rabbit hole and it's too late.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think one of the important pieces of that is, it's not like, let's look at the data at one point in time. It's developing the muscle to look at the data over and over again, and seeing and reflecting on not only what happened in the past 6 months, but it's like, what happened the past week? What happened the past month? Is this something we should be concerned about? Is it not? Why? Let's dig into it a little bit. Let's learn. And every month it's like a little test, or a hypothesis, and you try to learn more and learn more. And I think that's what developing a strong business is all about. And getting to that Z is about learning information all along the way so that you can respond the right way and really, ultimately serve your clients and your clinicians or whoever your customers are the right way. It's a constant learning environment, and data helps you learn.
Yeah. So I guess flipping to the other side of this equation, what would you say has been the most rewarding part of your job in your 3 years at Nomad?
That's easy. It's the people. It's the people. Like I got to meet Alexi the first. When I spoke to Alexi the first time, I really enjoyed having a conversation with him. And over the past few years, again, the relationship has grown. Same thing with Justin. And now, I have a team of people that I work with, and the team within the company. I think if you're around enthusiastic, passionate people that are aligned, anything's possible. And that empowers me, that inspires me, because the energy reciprocates throughout the organization. The inspiration reciprocates. When we just had a meeting the other day and someone put together a document where I was like, my gosh, that's amazing. That person put so much time into it. It was sourced with a ton of data, and it was so well done. And we've seen that a lot in the organization. But I said, wow, I thought to myself, it's like, it's great to work at a place that has such discipline and rigor around some of the things it is we're trying to do. That it starts at the top, but it permeates the entire organization. And I feel like, the people that I work with at Nomad are always in search or in pursuit of this excellence that I like to do, or I like to pursue as an individual. And it's great to be around that. Now, that doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean we don't stumble. We're tolerant because we know their heart's in the right place and their intellect's in the right place. But being around that is a very special organism. It's hard to build that, right? So you have to hire the right people for it, and it takes time to do that. That's why I think you should hire slowly and get the right people on the bus for the right role. And being the company is going to grow, so the people have to have the capacity to grow within them, and it's hard to capture that in like 4 rounds of interviews. But you need to do your best at that. So I think you take your time hiring, and ultimately it comes down to, I think, the people you work with and the mission that you're on. And if they are aligned and everyone's pursuing the same thing, then the flywheel catches, and it is beautiful.
So it's funny you say that, because I'd be curious. You were the first finance hire at your past 2 companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be curious. So you've had basically the opportunity to build out your full finance and accounting team, and so the people. I'd be curious to kind of pick your brain as to how you can. I mean, it's tough, right? The interviewing process is not easy, but judging someone on a couple rounds of interviews, do you have any tips there? Is there any like recommendations? Like, have you learned anything during that process of building out those teams?
Yeah, actually, I have now. As the first finance hire, you have to be, I call it, you got to go from bank statements to boardrooms, so you have to span the entire spectrum of, I got to get into the weeds, know the bank statements, forget about what the books and records say right now, because I need to own these numbers. So you got to get so far into the weeds, but then you also have to zoom out so you can explain things to your CEO and to the board about how things are working. And that spectrum of information is something that you own. So you have to contextualize all that. But also, it requires a certain attitude that says, I need to roll up my sleeves, I need to dig in. And what I've learned is it's the first hires that I've made have been more about attitude, and also complementary to what I'm not that great at. I'm good enough at things, but I'm not a CPA. So I needed someone, as I was building out the team, I needed someone to come in and really own some of the controls around accounting. And also they needed to have the right attitude, so, and it's really hard. And I say attitude because, oftentimes we say cultural fit, et cetera, but, you can get a sense of an attitude from someone over a certain course of time, because not that we're working 24 hours a day, but like if it's midnight, you want to have fun working with that person still. It's like, you're tired. And I'm not saying we do that, but if you can work with someone 24 hours a day and they have the right attitude, it's like, I really like working with that person. So what I've learned is that attitude matters, and it's contagious. And the first few hires are the ones that are going to set the tone for your department, not let alone the company. But in finance alone, I hired for attitude and skill set and ambition. And then and also just the complement of what I wanted to go down a certain path, and I knew I needed help down another path, but I wanted to complement that. So they were like the first couple hires, but then as the organization grew, I started seeing the functional needs expand, because I wanted to take some things off the CEO's plate and the COO's plate, because that should live within my department. But the company was growing, so my role without taking those things on was expanding. So if I wanted to be better at my job and partner with my team, I wanted to assume some of those responsibilities so they could be the best at their job, you know? And in order for me to do that, then I needed to start building out these functional departments in our organization. So, you know, the first hire was around accounting, and then it started becoming more functional because we have different departments in our business, whether billing, payroll, accounting, et cetera. So I started building out those verticals, and that's kind of how we've grown into the department we're in right now. And that's how we're going to continue to grow. So far, it's working out pretty well. Yeah, I think going back, I think the first hire has to be around attitude and skill set that complements certain things, and then you have to respond to what is needed most in the organization as you grow. And that could be, you know, little functional silos or not. It just depends on your organization.
Yeah, no, I think you really hit the nail on the head there, because I think attitude and personality are kind of at the forefront when I'm thinking of that process. I mean, you could teach a lot of skills if someone doesn't have it. I mean, obviously you were looking for certain needs, so maybe skills that you didn't have, you were looking for someone to fill those needs as well. But I think you could teach a lot of things in a job. So reading someone's resume for what it is and saying they can do ABC, you might be able to teach someone that, like, can I get along with this person? Is it going to be a short relationship?
Yep.
I look at that stuff. I prioritize a lot of that stuff from my mind. Not everyone obviously works that way, but
yeah,
it's neat to hear you say
yeah,
that.
and I think, you know, another way to actually call out the word attitude would just be a perspective on the work you're doing. So, you know, in early stage companies, you don't know exactly what you're doing 6 months from now.
Yep.
You have no idea. But I want someone to be excited about that. I want someone to be excited about learning something new. And if they come to the office or to now Zoom meetings with this level of excitement, says like, hey, this is totally new. Yeah, I want to own this. Let me run with this. Let me learn about this. That's the attitude, because this is not, you know, hey, come into the company and start checking the boxes. This is, we don't know what box you're going to have to check 6 months from now. So, but you're going to tell me what the box should be and where we need to really focus. And that's the attitude that I want, where it's, I want to get after it. And, you know, I want to get better at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ride the wave, just jump on the train, because we're moving full steam ahead.
Yeah.
So a couple of final questions I have for you before we wrap up. So one is, what is one thing that you haven't, or maybe the company hasn't quite accomplished yet, right? Something that you're striving towards. What are one of your goals that maybe you wanted to achieve in the last year, 2 years, that maybe kind of got pushed by the wayside just because things have changed? Like you said, you don't know what you're doing 6 months from now, so the job is always changing, right?
Yeah.
What's kind of something that you're working towards? And it doesn't have to be company specific, just maybe even something with your team, like you're trying to fill a role, or you're trying to work out building your systems or something, like integrating automation, something to that effect.
So I'll answer this question, and I think one way to phrase it would be, you know, what mistakes did you make, or what would you wish you had avoided, right? Potentially.
And I tried to ease it a little softer than that.
No, that's fine. I think over the past year, I think so you go into the office day in and day out and you have your job to do, and the volume just starts packing up. And what I should have done, and some of the things that I've learned, is once you realize you need, and this was actually said to me, so I can't take credit for this, but once you realize you need someone or something, it's actually too late, because the momentum is just, it's going. And but you have to, I've always taken the perspective of, I want to run kind of a lean back office, because I want all of our investment dollars to fund growth and value creation. So, you know, I can run through Google Sheets and Excel, and I can deal with all this stuff, but sometimes I need help. And I feel like you have to, once I realize I need help, that's the point at which it was a little too late. So it's thinking about 6 months to a year from now and building the team so that when the volume does come in, you have someone to help you with that, so you can make sure nothing falls through the cracks. Now, we've upgraded systems. I think one of the things we need to do is continue upgrading systems. That's an area that I wish we did a little earlier, but now we need to do it, and we're going to start doing, and we're going to do that. And when I say systems, again, this is more, finance side of things. And I'm speaking only from the perspective of like me and potentially your audience, which is more, finance and accounting related. It's thinking more about bringing on earlier capacity when we are often looking at dollars coming in and dollars going out, and you want to be very lean and responsible and disciplined, but you still have to think 6 months down the road or a year down the road and stress test the scenarios and say, what if this happens? Okay, well then if that happens, we should have a system that can do this, we should have a team that can do this, and try to plan accordingly. I'm not saying go out and hire a 100-person finance team for a small organization because you have this A to Z vision, but you can kind of keep the pulse of certain things. And I think it's also, I would like to make sure the team my job is to make sure the team is going to be the best at their job. So you have to think 6 months down the road. And in certain areas, I've done that. In other areas, I think I could have done better.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to do. It also, like you said, you don't necessarily know the volume you can expect for it. You could budget for it and plan for what you're expecting the company to be in 6 months, 12 months. But hitting those marks and making sure it's tough. Sometimes you just you're playing catch up, right? And it's not. It just happens. It
happens. Yep.
So to wrap up here, what recommendations? I asked this question to all of our guests. What recommendations do you have for other founders, other executives that are really spearheading a startup or emerging technology company? Doesn't have to be specific to the health tech industry as a whole. Any tips or tricks that you've learned that you think have worked well for you or your companies that you've experienced during your career?
Yeah, I think listening is extremely important. Listening to the people around you, listening to your clients, listening to your users. That you can't do enough of that. I'm not saying don't make decisions because you don't want to be paralyzed in making those decisions, but I think listening to them often provides you with some information that you weren't expecting to hear, or that could help you serve them better. So I think it is making sure that you listen. The other thing that I think founders should consider is when you're building out your team, I think culture starts at the top. And I think founders should really, or even just executives in general, when you're building out the team, find people that have the same attitude or the attitude that you want to exemplify in the organization. Hiring people is so important. And oftentimes, I was saying, like, sometimes if you find out you need someone, it's often too late. So you may be rushed into making a hiring decision. So that's why I think building the team around really good people is one of the most important things you can do. The alternative to that is hiring someone that could potentially be toxic to the organization, and it could cause so much friction. So I would say that, it's the people you surround yourself with that is going to make the organization that you want to exist in the future. So it's extremely important to get that right and take your time and really understanding what it is you need.
Attitude starts at the top.
Starts at the top. Yep. Yep.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. That just about wraps up today's episode. Thank you for joining me today, Jess. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the time. It was great talking to you.
Awesome. If you'd like to learn more about Nomad Health, feel free to visit nomadhealth.com, and we will see you all on the next episode of Founded in Tech. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked it and want to hear more, you can follow us and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Founded in Tech.